Hi folks, Dave, the Honest Audiophile, and this is the Meze Audio Empyrean 2, and these are my Honest Audiophile impressions. I want to thank Meze Audio for providing the Empyrean 2 for review. To greatly appreciate it. Meze Audio, you rock. Alright, so the Meze Audio Empyrean 2, this will set you back $3,000 from your bank account. It is a open back over-ear planar headphone. It has 32 ohms of impedance, 105 decibels of sensitivity, and a frequency response range of 8 Hz to 110 kilohertz. And it weighs 385 grams. The Meze Audio Empyrean 2. This is the sequel to the original Empryean, which I owned for quite a while. I did end up selling it in order to purchase the Audeze LCD-5, but I have very fond memories of the original Empryean, and this reminds me a lot of it, especially build wise. So you have this nice big spring steel headband, that iconic curved strap that's made of leather and says Empryean on the top of it. The cups swivel all the way around. They have a little bit of spring return when you tilt them. Big sliders so that they will fit pretty much any size head. Removable pads with that magnetic connection for them to stay in place. You have that honeycomb pattern for the open back screen. Overall, just a beautiful looking headphone. And of course, you have your mini XLR connections here on the bottom. Putting it on your head, and they just disappear. The clamp force is really close to perfect, and they are light at 385 grams, and they just fit any head. And of course, outside noises, isolation is not very good, and this is an open back headphone. Comfort wise, I can wear these for several hours before they start to get a little warm on the ears, and they're pretty much an everyday, all day long type of wearing headphone. You're not going to get tired of having them on your head, other than needing to take a little bit of a break because they get a little warm. The Meze Empyrean 2 comes with a nice arrangement of accessories. You get this carrying case that is square shaped. You got the Meze logo, some nice metal feet on the bottom, a nice leather strap, and then locking. You can open it. You got nice padding up top and a lot of padding on the inside. Hold your headphones, and then an area for your extra pads and for cables. And it's going to protect the headphones very well. You get some extra cables. Meze provided 3 different cables for this review, and they come in these little black bags with some Meze logo on them. Cables that were provided, you get a nice one that terminates into a 3.5 for portable use, and the connections going into the headphone are indicated with blue and red. And then they also provided a cable that terminates into a 4.4 balanced, and then a longer cable that terminates into an XLR. Overall, all of the cables are very nicely built and feel durable and sound good, and they all sounded the same. Now, the Empryean 2 has removable pads, and Meze did include 2 types of pads. So they include what they call the Duo pad, which is Alcantara on top, and then you have leather here on the bottom. And then on the inside, you have fenestrated leather. Kind of hard to see on camera. And then they also included the Alcantara pad, which is Alcantara all throughout. I actually preferred the Alcantara pad. Now the pads definitely make a difference sonically. I found that the Duo pad is the more fun and energetic pad. They have a lot more bass. You're going to get more extension into the sub bass. You're also going to get a little bit more fullness, a little bit more impact, punch, and slam using the Duo pad. But it does bleed into the mids a little bit. There's a little bit of added in warmth to it, but at times it sounded a little bit bloated. And then up in the upper mids and treble regions, it's more forward and a little bit more aggressive in its presentation. I found them to be slightly shouty and more fatiguing. And I found that the Duo pad just wasn't quite as pleasurable on the ears as the Alcantara pad. The Alcantara pad doesn't have as much bass extension. It is slightly rolled off in the sub bass regions, and then the mid bass and upper bass regions aren't quite as elevated as they are with the Duo pad. It doesn't have as much of a fullness and quite as much impact and slam, but it still has a nice hefty amount. And then those mids and treble regions aren't quite as spicy. They're not quite as fatiguing, and they don't have quite as much of a bite. And I just found that the Alcantara pad was more pleasurable to listen to and also sounded more neutral and natural. The Meze Audio Empyrean 2 is fairly easy to drive. I find that the Empryean 2, being 32 ohms and 105 decibels sensitivity, is pretty much able to be driven by dongles, DAPs, and desktop. Dongles get them the volume. You're not going to get the best performance out of them, but for the most part, you'll be able to listen to your Empryean 2 using a dongle. DAPs are more preferred, and so are desktop. I did find that the Empryean 2 scales with a little bit of better quality source. And I also found that the Empryean 2 is a little bit source picky. So I tried it on all of my dongles and DAPs, which are the Hibby R5 Gen 2 and the Sony A105. But I also tried it on desktop. Mytek Liberty DAC 2, the Mytek Liberty HPA, FIO K11, the FIO K9 AKM, the Audeze Deckard, the AUN S9C Pro, the AUN S17 Pro, the JDS Labs Atom Plus, and several other devices that have come in while I've had the Empryean. And it played well with all of them. But I found that on some sources that are more neutral analytical leaning, like the Mytek, with the Duo pad, and on some tracks, it can just be super fatiguing and almost unlistenable. So it is a little bit picky, and synergy is a little bit hard to come by with the Empryean 2. How does the Empryean 2 sound? So all sound impressions will be done using the Alcantara pad. The bass of the Meze Empyrean 2 is very nice. I found it to be engaging, giving enough extension into the sub bass to give a little bit of rumble and grumble when called upon in tracks. And I found that there was enough punch and slam and kick and enough texture to keep everything engaging and moving, and the toes tapping and the air drummers happy. I found that overall it's just a very engaging bass with good details and nice resolution. And overall I found that it has good control. Tone and timbre is nice and accurate, and it reproduces instruments accurately and true. And it just has this enough presentation of impact and slam to keep everything rolling without being too emphasized or being too not enough and being dull and boring. The mids of the Empryean 2 I found to be a nice pleasurable experience in the main mids. and the lower mids. Upper mids are elevated a little too much. They're a little too forward and can be shouty at times. If you're sensitive to elevated upper mids, the Empyrean 2 may be a little too much for you. I did find it to be borderline for me. The Empyrean 2 mids have pretty natural tone and timbre. In those upper mids where they're elevated, I did find that strings and brass instruments and the upper regions of pianos and guitars could sound a little bit forced and a little bit thin sounding, and they just kind of lose a little bit of naturalism. But overall, for the most part, the mids are pretty close to natural, and everything sounds very engaging, and it's forward, and it just has this presentation that puts the spotlight on the vocalists and on the mids and the instruments, and everything just kind of gets presented with a spotlight on the performers. And tone and timbre is almost natural, as I mentioned. Detail retrieval and resolution is good. Moving on into the treble, the lower treble and the upper treble are a little bit elevated, and I do find that on the duo pads it's even more elevated. It can be a little bit much, so if you're sensitive to treble presence, the Empyrean 2 may be a little too much. And for me, I did find it to be a little bit bitey, a little bit too edgy, and a little bit fatiguing at times, especially with the duo pad and on some sources. But overall, the treble extends nicely, and there's good air and space, and the tone and timbre, like the mids, is pretty much natural. But where those peaks are in a little too much elevation, they have a tendency to be a little bit thin and a little unnatural sounding. Detail retrieval and resolution of the treble is good. Soundstage of the Empyrean 2 is impressive. It has a nice width to it, and you can determine different sizes of venues: small, medium, large, extra large, grand, grander. It does a really amazing job of presenting and putting you in the space. You can really feel crowd energy around you, and you can feel like you're close to the stage or far away from the stage. It does a great job of engaging you and placing you there and imaging things across the stage. You can track them. You can, whoop, I'm locked on, and follow it. It does a really good job with placement and then being able to track it. It follows it pinpoint. Depth is nice. You can really look into the stage. First row, second row, third row, a little bit further out. You can really read into the stage, and you can tell that's in front, that's in back, that moved, that slid over, it's going across. Oh, it went further into the stage, it went back. It does the staging of the Empyrean 2 is very well done. I'm rather impressed by the way it does it. It's fantastic for gaming, and also is amazing for watching shows and movies and listening to music. Live music sounds really good with the Empyrean 2. Tone and timbre is for the most part pretty natural, especially in the bass. It does a really good job with being a very natural and accurate sounding. The mids are slightly a little bit too forward in the uppers, causing it to be just a little bit thin and at times sound a little artificial. Same with the treble. The treble has a little bit of peaks in it, and that at times can sound a little bit unnatural and just a little too spicy. Detail retrieval and resolution is also really good. I was rather impressed by how much details you got. And there are moments of, wow, I don't think I've ever heard that before in a track. And then it also resolves it very well. It has very good details and resolution. It's not going to let you down. It's a very good headphone in that regard. So the Meze Audio Empyrean 2. Yeah, I like this. I like it quite a bit. And as I was listening to it, I was like, what headphones am I going to compare it to? I don't have an original, but I have a couple other headphones. And, I was listening, and I was like, this reminds me of a headphone that's in the budget realm. This is, like a headphone that I reviewed a while back, and it just kind of sounds like this. I'm like, so I started listening to all these different headphones that are behind me, and I was listening to them, and I came across the Moondrop Para. And I started comparing it to the Empryean, and they sound very similar. I was rather surprised at how close they sound. Very similar presentations. The Para does have a little bit more a note weight in the mids, just a little bit. It's not quite as elevated in the upper mids and treble regions. It does have a little bit more musicality to it. It's not quite as forced in those areas. Soundstage is not quite as wide on the Para, and it doesn't do quite as good with details and resolution. Tone and timbre are very similar, but it doesn't have that artificialness moments with strings and brass instruments like the MP2. If you're looking for a headphone that sounds similar to an Empryean 2 but is a whole lot cheaper, you might want to consider the Moondrop Para. And then a headphone that I use as my reference headphone, and that I purchased when I sold the original MP, and that is the Audeze LCD-5. Now, the Audeze LCD-5 is more expensive by a significant amount. And I find that the Audeze LCD-5 sounds better overall. It's a better performer, in my opinion, throughout. It's a more neutral sound signature. It's not as elevated in the mids and in the treble region. It does a better job of portraying naturalism in tone and timbre, and it doesn't have that artificialness in the upper mids and treble regions like the Empryean 5. The Empryean 2. The LCD-5 has a more accurate soundstage. It is not quite as wide and as grandeur and somewhat artificial sounding. The LCD-5 has a little bit closer, but more accurate and true representation of the stage. In my opinion, it does better with imaging and depth and layering. I find that the LCD-5 also is a significant step up when it comes to details and resolution. So the the Meze Empyrean 2. I like this headphone, and when I think back to my original that I owned, the original had this emotional connection. It had this little bit of soul to it, but it lacked some details and resolution, and it was more about the musicality. With the Empryean 2, you're going more for details, resolution, a little bit more space in the soundstage, and you're losing a little bit of that musicality for the technicalities. So depending on what you're looking for, and the Empryean, if you have the original but you want a little bit more analytical leaning, you might want to consider the Empryean 2. But if you like that soulful lushness of the original, the Empryean 2 doesn't quite have that. That's not what it's aimed at. It's aimed for being more neutral leaned, analytical leaned. I like it, but I'm going to stick with the Audeze LCD-5 and also the Moondrop Para. It's been Dave, the Honest Audiophile. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you on the next video. Speaking of next video, somewhere on the screen, subscription links and notification bells. If you haven't already, please check those off. Don't forget to give a thumbs up or a thumbs down to the video, and check out all the links down below. There's all kinds of information down there regarding how you contact the channel, follow the channel, support the channel. All that kind of stuff is listed down below. Speaking of supporting the channel, I want to thank my supporters through Patreon and YouTube memberships for all that you give to the channel. Is much appreciated. If you're interested in supporting the channel, there are several ways that you can do that: through one-time gifts, through PayPal, Venmo, or through monthly subscriptions with Patreon and YouTube memberships. With YouTube memberships and Patreon, you can get access to videos early, so you can see the Meze Empyrean 2 video early or other videos early. And also you can get access to my private Discord server. If you're interested in supporting the channel, it'd be much appreciated, and thank you for doing that. Also, check out all the other links down below. There's all kinds of other information like gear recommendations, music recommendations, and all kinds of other things. So check out the links down below. And lastly, don't forget to enjoy the music and that honesty is the best policy.